And welcome back to Janky AF. Well, what do we have here? Boy, thank you so much to Ilion or Elion Barajas, and feel free to correct me on the pronunciation of that. Shout out to you for suggesting that we need more content on my own Aerostars, and here we are finally. I really appreciated that little sort of fire under my tuchus, so to speak, because here I am washing the Aerostar, and it's so long overdue just to give this thing a wash. And it's funny when it's wet how the you'll see it in the side shot too, how the patina almost goes away and you get like a look at a really fresh minty Aerostar. But I gotta say, when it dries out, I actually quite like the patina on this vehicle. So I did a brief introduction. This is a longer introduction, and it was great because I got to take it out on a drive. It was a beautiful, beautiful Saturday. Probably one of the last few great Saturdays we'll get here in upstate New York. Gave it a nice wash, took it for a nice little drive, got to talk about it and reminisce, and that's why we own classic cars, because it makes us feel good to drive them. Every time I drive this thing, I'm just happier afterwards. It sounds cliche, or it sounds too good to be true, but it's not. Even if it's not running great, which it usually is. It's just nice to get behind the wheel and go for a drive. That's why we have these things, Aside from its practicality, which, as I mentioned in this video, it is quite a useful machine still to me. Yeah, thanks for coming along, and I hope you enjoy this little ride and get some more insights into my Aerostars. And I will say real briefly, I was at the shop today, actually, as I'm recording this, to bring the tires and wheels for my 93 Aerostar, so hopefully that will be back soon as well. And they can meet, because they've never actually met each other, so really looking forward to that. And of course I will keep you posted, and of course more Year of the Aerostars coming, and hopefully some reviews of some other interesting great cars as well. So, Janky Thanky for everybody. I've gotten some really cool messages about people's Aerostars, which I'm excited to share here on the channel. Some Aero Mail, I think we'll call that sequence, and enjoy. And welcome back to Janky AF. Well, I did a brief introduction to my 1986 Aerostar. This will be a slightly less brief introduction to my 1986 Ford Aerostar. It's not a full-on review of every car is a great car, but this is certainly a great car, so let's start it up and take a little cruise, shall we? Now, I did cold start it earlier. It started right up, no problem, after sitting for weeks, and I got my parking brake on, and apparently that works, which is a good sign too. Just a couple of cameras rolling today. It's a beautiful day, probably one of the last few beautiful days we're gonna get, so no better time than to get the Aerostar out and take it for a little drive. If you watched my first introduction, which you can see in the link that I'll provide here, some basic details about this vehicle. 1986, the first year, is of course a 5-speed manual transmission, a Mazda unit, and we're letting it rev out here as we go down a hill. And a 4-cylinder, fuel-injected, the Lima inline 4-cylinder engine. Now, they only made that engine for 2 years, or at least in this vehicle, and it was determined to be underpowered, which I can absolutely vouch for. And that's like sort of not the theme, but I just haven't driven this vehicle a lot, and I'm very happy for the person who commented to ask about content about my own Aerostars, because to be quite honest with you, did I just stall it? Nope. I'm a little scared to drive this car. Just like from the day I got it, it's had some, it scared me a few times. The transmission went out on my attempted drive back, and that made me now I'm with my green Aerostar, I'm 0 for 2 on driving Aerostars back. But I shouldn't be scared of it, because overall it has been quite reliable. As we wind out third gear here, I love the exhaust note on this car. Maybe I'll get some, I got some in the first video. Just has this farty burble to it, which I really love. And it is underpowered, but this car is what made me fall in love with classic cars. It is my first classic car. It has the greatest story of any classic car I've picked up so far. It was in Dothan, Alabama. Shout out to my friend Chris Dermond and the great Gavin from Royal Chrysler who helped me retrieve it. And then it was just, a saga to try to get it back up here, failed attempts. I'll tell the whole story sometime, but it was an epic journey, but it finally got up here, got the transmission fixed, actually replaced. And since then, it as times has served as my daily driver. When my other cars were in the shop, I've used this vehicle to drive to work and to haul people around in. I still use it to haul gear around in, pellets for the pellet wood stove, all sorts of things. It's still, in 2020, a very practical vehicle for many of different excursions and chores and errands and stuff like that. And it is a great car. Now I'm going to rev match here to downshift into third. It does, I don't know if it has synchros, but the gears are a little tricky to find, especially third gear. It's kind of straight ahead, but sometimes you feel like you're a little off to the side, so I always rev match it, and it seems to go into gear a lot smoother. Just cruising in third gear, that's my favorite gear. Second and third are the gears I stay in the most. None of the gears really have any power, and this car hates hills. That's probably one of the single reasons why this engine was later gotten rid of, and they went to two 6-cylinder engines, the 2.8 that it started with, and then eventually went to the 3.0 and the 4.0. And having my 3.0 Aerostar now, which should be back from the shop very soon, it's just a lot more modern power. This thing I would not want to drive on the thruway. The one time I did, of course, it broke down. Although that wasn't really a power thing, but nonetheless, it's just, I say this with classic cars, they make you a better driver, because this thing, you can't, if there's a car coming, you can't just pull out and get ahead of them. It's very, very slow, and it has no airbags. You're riding up high, which is kind of funny with this big shifter. You don't have any sensation that anything will protect you in the event of an accident. And because of that, the brakes are not very good. I mean, it's a very heavy car. It does have discs in the front and pads in the rear. Now, we're going to drive by some my buddies who are painting, which I'm going to join them after this. But I thought it'd be fun to give them a drive-by, and I did put, there they go. I put the camera out the window, one, so I could see them on camera, and two, so I could showcase the sliding window, which is one of many, many cool features in the Aerostar of sort of unique traits. Like a lot of the minivans, even way after this thing was gone, the windows would just pop out and you'd get a little crack. This has a full sliding window, so it doesn't roll down, but it slides out. Provides easy access, very cheap to make, no motors involved, and very, very practical. And that's sort of the Aerostar. It has so many little features on it that make it this ultimate utility vehicle. And this car being almost 40 years old now, sure, it's not like something you would necessarily daily drive and just get in and go, although you probably could. You just have to be aware of, climbing hills and make sure you stay in the right gear and all that. Again, I preach the Aerostar ethos and I try to live it too, because this car to this day still helps me run errands and do chores, as I mentioned before. The suspension, very, very bumpy. It feels everything, which I guess, I always just liken this Aerostar to a sports car too, because it's manual transmission, rear wheel drive. It's relatively short, and like a sports car that has sort of a hard suspension, you feel everything in the road. Now I'm going to throw it in reverse, and a lot of times, I watch this on Jay Leno, you're supposed to put it into second before you put in reverse. A lot of times when you put in reverse, it'll lurch if the engine hasn't totally slowed down, so we'll see if it does that. No lurch there. You got to treat these cars gently. Remember, this is almost a 40-year-old car, and a lot of it is still original paint, obviously, and I absolutely love the patina on it. Power steering pump, that's going to whine a little bit, as Aerostars like to do. Well-known feature of the Fords. The steering, very, very vague. Unlike a sports car, I suppose, or a good one. You can rock it around a little bit, and the car just seesaws back and forth. You can feel it almost tilting on its axis. You do get the impression that it's a tall vehicle, and it's probably not that tall for a modern vehicle, but for how short it is, it is like sort of a funny proportion. The profile of this car was used next to that of a spaceship in their advertising, and you can kind of tell why it does have that spaceship profile as we pass. Maybe the camera will pick that up. Lovely little MG, if our camera hasn't fallen off yet, which I don't know if it has or not. The thing about patinaed cars, I almost have to put all the cameras on glass, because the camera is liable to fall off on account of the paint not being smooth and the suction not making a good mount. So I actually don't know if it's, oh, it looks like it's still on there. That's good. The interior, now I've talked about recently in my Year of the Aerostar videos, I do like the facelifted Aerostar interior, but I'm glad this doesn't have it because this is so 80s. It's this little box, and at 55, there's no tachometer. At 55 miles an hour, all your numbers turn yellow, and at 75 miles per hour, all your numbers turn orange. So in essence, it's not really about how many revs you're making, it's just that you should be really careful going over 55 miles per hour, and you basically shouldn't go over 75 miles per hour in this vehicle. And I just think that's hilarious, and it's probably pretty good, wise advice from Ford. But this car's not about speed, it's about hauling stuff, and it's about having a good time. Now, obviously it's not a sports car, I liken it to one, but because of this manual transmission, you really can row through the gears. And it's happy to do so. And again, no tachometer, so it's all just by noise. And this engine works pretty hard anyhow because anytime you need to climb any sort of incline, you're going to be revving it out. I wish I knew what the actual quote-unquote red line was, or what this engine is able to rev to. But once you get in fourth gear, if you're on a flat stretch of road, it has enough pull. It has a little oomph. If I put my foot down in fourth gear, you get a little grunt from the rear. And it is rear-wheel drive, obviously, as I've mentioned several times. You can tell I'm a little nervous when I'm driving it. Now, part of that's a good nervousness and excitement, as I'm going to go into third here to start this mild ascent. And I wonder by the end of this hill if I'll actually have to go into second. Now, where this Aerostar is parked is up on a long hill, and it is quite the quite the nerve-wracking endeavor to climb it. And, I don't have any reason to believe it's not reliable. I just had new plugs and wires put in, a nice tune-up. The airbox was refreshed. But you just hear all these noises coming from it. When you shift gears in that little brief moment between when your foot's on the clutch, you kind of feel everything like lurch and shift. But it's so mechanical, which is what I love about it. It just has this beautiful mechanic feeling where you are the car in this moment in time. It floats a little bit, and even though the suspension is hard in terms of railroad tracks and bumps, when you're actually on a smooth patch of road, it does kind of like float along a little bit. You feel it kind of wave up and down just like an old boat or a Buick. Boy, the steering, it's really two hands on the wheel at all times, because if you start to fishtail in this thing, it's probably not going to end well, and you're probably going to roll the vehicle over. The turn signal lights all work very nicely, a nice beautiful indicator here. When you go into neutral, it's just like so slushy in the middle there. Yet when you're trying to find a gear, the gears are actually quite precise, I would say, or as well as they can be. First gear, sometimes a little tough to get into, but it goes in happy enough. Now we'll climb the final hill here. Look at that, first gear, I'm already out of it. I gotta go into second. This is like, when I bought my Fiat X19, I saw an ad for it that said this is a momentum car, which is another way of saying it's slow and underpowered. But this is truly a momentum car. If you're gonna take a hill, you want to, downshift soon and then accelerate into that turn to climb that hill. The only problem with that is there's so much body roll in this car that doing so makes it for, if you have anything that's not secured in the inside of the car, it's going to go flying all over the place. I hear some sort of like little, not ticking in the motor. It sounds like seems speed related. I don't know what that is. That's the thing. You have to drive these old cars, and I've been afraid to do so, but you really have to, because if you don't, more and more things go wrong. So you got to do it regularly, and I just wanted to get this Aerostar out today, stretch your legs a little bit, and show it to you all, of course, because it is the pride of the fleet. It's the first one I've ever had, and it will never be sold, and I'll have it forever. Not a bad turning radius if you can put up with the steering pump noise. But we're not getting any smoking out of the back or anything like that. Now I'm going to back it into my driveway. You can see it peel out. You can see all that power from that rear wheel drive there. And I'll put that on the other camera so you can see the hilarity of what I have to do to get this thing into the garage. And my microphone's caught on the seatbelt there. Well, there you go. There's a slightly less brief introduction into my 1986 Ford Aerostar. Nice to take it for a little country mile today, sort of explain just a little bit. You know, I can talk forever about these vehicles, but you get a little bit of a sense of the driving impressions. We will, of course, do a full review on it, and we're working on some content with my other buddy who I sold my other 86 Aerostar to, the 86ers, we call our little club. Getting a little squeak in there, aren't we? So much more Aerostar coming, and of course, Year of the Aerostar, that never stops coming. So thanks a lot for riding along with us here, and I hope you enjoyed this little less brief introduction, and there'll be much more to come. We'll slowly work you up to a full Every Car is a Great Car review, of which this vehicle is the title sequence car, you know, so etched in time forever. All right, there you have it. Until next time, Janky do Thanky. Janky do Thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.